got there, we unloaded that ship. Then we got on a train and went back down to Charleston. And we stayed there some more, unloading hospital ships and that. Then we got on a hospital ship and we went back to England. They all followed that same route. Takes over 2 weeks for a slow ship. We went to a place called Potter's Bar. Well, that was one place, and another place was Colchester. Gosh, I know that it was the area where the 8th Airborne was, and every day you could see them guys, they'd get them ships up. We knew where they were going. But I think when we were in Colchester, we worked in sometimes we had to go and work in the post office, and they'd have a big table out, and they'd dump the bags of packages and stuff on that table. Then we had to take the package and look and see what the address was, and then we had to look up and find out where the new address was, and make out an outfit and put that on a package and then send it off to where it was supposed to go. I know at that time, a couple of times we went to the post office and had to do that. Those free things, email, yeah. But you had to be careful what you couldn't write much because it'd all be censored. But I was writing to different ones, mother and stuff. No, you didn't need anything. The PX and that, they had anything you could want. You didn't have to send them any food, but on that table, after dumping them packages out, a lot of times packages got broke open, and if you see the mess there, why, nobody needed to send anything. We got onto another one. I can't, nothing about it. But we came in New York, past the Statue of Liberty. And then, that time we hung around. There's a place called Fort Hamilton. If you ever heard of that, we stayed there. And I know that where the train, or that, what they call it, they go over the Brooklyn Bridge, went by there. You could go to New York, and then when you were coming home, if you didn't get off at the right place and go past Fort Hamilton, why, when you woke up, you was in Coney Island. I woke up at Coney Island. Well, one time when I was going too, we were riding along, and I see a bunch of pigeons, and so I got off at the next stop, and I went over to that guy's house, and he was a cop from New York, and he had them pigeons, and I talked to him for a while, and he gave me a ride up to Coney Island. Well, I had to go on a roller coaster, and I remember that, and I walked all around there to see what you could see. I know they had that outfit where they pulled you up and drop you in a parachute. That was something. And I can't remember what ship we got on. We got on the America, if you heard of that. The West Point. It was named the West Point during the war. And that carried 7,000 troops. And it took 6.5 days to get back over to England. And that time we went in a convoy. And I remember when they were coming into the English Channel, I don't know what they were doing, but all of a sudden they start swerving back and forth and throwing off death charges. I know there was guys there that were playing poker and had their money in their cards all laying out. And when they start zigzagging back and forth, all the money and stuff laid there. They were up the steps. They were going to try to get out, but up at the top of the steps was an MP, and he shut the door. You're staying in your compartment. I never really heard if that was just something they did to give you a little sample of what could happen, but I never found out for sure. But when you first got on that ship, why, you could walk from one end to the other. They had doors that shut off the compartments. But when you got out to sea, them doors all went shut, and you had about 300 guys in each compartment. I know when I was in shaving, when they start throwing out them depth charges, and when we see you couldn't get out, why, we just went back and laid on the bunk. Somebody had a bottle of booze, and they broke that out. And had a little shot of booze, and that's lay on your bed, that's it. They blow a hole in the side, you're gone. That West Point was a big, I know when we were out to sea, they had practice. They had at the bow and the stern, they had a 5-inch gun. And then on the side, they had a 3-inch on each side. And then they had all kinds of 50 caliber machine guns. And they had them other pom-pom things. And that whole convoy, they pulled a target across by airplane, and everybody cut loose without everything they had. Boy, so that was a real 4th of July. I think that went up to Glasgow. But those ships didn't pull up to a dock. They were too big. They had to unload them. Yeah, I think and the last time we went to Birmingham, and there we went to a place called Swanhurst Park. That was a little park, and they had a little lake there. You could rent a boat and row around the lake. I know, but when we stayed in Birmingham for a while, we used to go down to you go down to that park, and there was always girls hanging around down there. We'd get one and take them for a ride out on the lake. They were all looking for husbands. I noticed when I met, her name was Beatrice Sims. And I talked to her that day, and that's where we used to go to the pub, but their pubs were only open certain times. But we had our own case, empty bottles, and we'd go over to the pub and have them fill them up. So when the pubs was closed, we still had something to drink. Another thing we used to go, and they always had a popcorn stand where they had fish and chips. They were pretty good. Chunks of fish and chips, chunks of potatoes. They had them like you got popcorn in a stand in piles like that. Well, that's the way they had that. And when you want something, they take a bag and fill her up. When it's time to go, they come with a truck, and you got your bag all packed in that. You throw it on the truck and climb aboard, and they take you where you're supposed to go. In Birmingham, and that was the last time we were there. And when we got on a ship, the General Washington, coming back, we came the same way. Well, you always had a partner, and you were assigned a different ward. I know a lot of times, I know the one we was on, this guy I was with, we had to take care of all fellas that couldn't make it in combat. Because I know when you went overseas, like on a Queen Mary, you hauled 16,000 guys. And a lot of them, when they get up to where things get kind of tough, why, everybody can't do that. So we always had a word full of them on the way back, and we had to stay in there, and at mealtime and that you just give them their utensil. Then when they come back, you had to collect that all. War neurosis, they call it. Now, and on each ship, they had a certain area where the more worse patients were, and they all had to. I know, and I worked in the kitchen, and they had buckets and stuff, and you had to go down to the kitchen and get the food. You tell them how many patients you got, and then they'd give you so much, and you would take that up, dish it out, and then clean up the trays and all that stuff. When we're pulling into the port there in New York, and we got the news that the war was over in Europe. Yeah, we thought we'd go home, but we didn't hardly get the boat unloaded, and we was on a train going west. We went through Chicago, and we took the northern route and went out, and we ended up in Pittsburgh, California. Well, that was quite a trip, that train ride, because a lot of places you stopped, guys were off the train. I don't know how they ever got collected again. A lot of them didn't make it back on the train. So then, as the troop train went along, they stopped some other place. These guys, they'd get on a train coming behind fast that would pass the troop train. Then they'd be at the next stop and get back on. With a bunch of guys they was hanging out that train all the time. Well, we was in this, I know where Camp Stoneman is. Well, the place we stayed was in Pittsburgh and Antioch, them two small towns there. Some guys went to work in a foundry when they was there a week. I says, I ain't out here to work in no foundry. I don't need no money. I had a friend, and he had an aunt and uncle in San Francisco. So we went up there for the weekend and stayed with him. And at night, I remember he took us out and crossed the Golden Gate Bridge so we could look back and see the lights on San Francisco. I remember there was a zoo or something out there right on the coast. We went out there, and when you went in there was a baboon or something. It wasn't. He was there drumming on a old wash tub. First he'd get down and he'd get a big mouthful of water. Then he'd get on that drum and he was pounding, and everybody was getting up close so they could see what's going on. And all of a sudden he'd quit pounding, and then he'd jump against the fence and he'd spit water out, over the whole crowd. That scattered them. Well, nobody ever said anything. They just, you get on the outfit and go. One day we got down to the port, Camp Stoneman. They had a sign there, pass through these portals, past the best damn soldiers in the world. So we got on a ship. We went out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and past Alcatraz and off to Hawaii. And 4 days later, we pulled into Pearl Harbor. We were, maybe 100 yards to the side of where the battleships were sunk there. Arizona was the first one laying sideways against that island. And there was a place across where we docked. We stayed there for 2 days. And we didn't get off the ship or nothing, but 2 days, and then we took off from there to go to the Philippines. And we stopped at a couple different islands. the Caroline Islands was one. We'd stop there and stay for maybe a day, and then we'd go again. Well, first, when we come in there, we were south towards Australia, and we came up to Manila, and the harbor there was it looked like a graveyard. All the ships, the masts, all that was showing above the water, and they had a area cleaned out where you could get one ship in to unload. So when we got off that ship, we went to a place they called the Whack Whack Country Club. It was a golf course. They had tents set up there. We stayed there for a while. It was completely bombed out. All the buildings were all marked. And we went to a place they called the Wall City or something, I think it was. The wall was just a dirt mound. It must have been, 50 yards it was thick. And they had places where they punched right through, and inside there was nothing but a pile of brick. All the brick buildings were leveled. Well, after we stayed on that golf course for a while, then we got assigned to the hospital there at Fort McKinley, the 51st General Hospital, and they had wards like, I know at first I worked on 2 wards, like 13 and 14 and 15 and 16. I worked on that ward. They had, on each ward they had 75 patients, but it was towards the end, and they didn't, there was no more sick. There was sick, but there was no wounded. We never had much to do with malaria. We had to take that Adabrin all the time. But then when you start turning yellow, and we said, that's enough of that. We didn't take it no more. We worked on them wards for a while, and all of a sudden we went out and got on a boat again, and we went up to China Sea, and we rode in a typhoon for 3 days. Boy, that ship, when you stood on end, all the equipment and everything was all locked in a wall, so it didn't get